Recently, I was invited to speak to some kids about my books, The Children We Left Behind and Black Victim to Black Victor. And this nonprofit that invited me out, basically they gave the kids two chapters to read, one from each book. They picked the chapters that they felt was age appropriate. These are kids who are about 13 years old, give or take. Um, and part of it was they're going to read it together and then invite me in as a speaker. So I went in after they had already read it, I think a day or two prior, and answered all their questions. They had questions based off of what was in the book. And it was an interesting experience for myself. I am a father, I've obviously talked to teenagers. My son's 19 now. So that part isn't weird for me. It was just interesting hearing their questions in regards to my books. Obviously, Black Victim and Black Victor talks about race. Children Left Behind talks heavily about family dynamics, childhood abandonment, things of that nature. So there were a number of questions that stood out throughout the Q&A, but what was very interesting was how political the dialogue eventually became, like outright political. And I was thinking to myself afterwards, like, why do these kids care so much about politics?
I wanted to represent the youth because what's happening now could change our futures. And what President Trump is doing and is threatening to do is frightening.
Wow.
Parents and teachers are talking about a lot of things that we don't know about. But unlike some people, we know the meaning of the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, woo!
Come on, we all saw the video talking about low IQ.
But I'll go to some of the questions. One of the questions was about the government assistance. And one girl specifically asked, do I believe that government assistance shouldn't be available because my mother found a way to not be reliant on government assistance? And my answer to her was that we all need help. Being an adult is tough, especially raising children. Sometimes we get help from our friends and family. Sometimes we get help from the government, right? So I'm not abolish all government systems or anything like that. But I recognize that this particular type of assistance is a trap for a lot of people. Because even if you're doing the right thing and you're just struggling, and you just need a little bit of help, you will get nothing unless you completely come down economically. And so someone is faced with a choice. Do I quit my job and become impoverished so I can get some help from the government? Or do I just struggle, and hopefully things will get easier? So that's the issue. Someone, maybe they just need some food stamps for a few months, 6 months, right? Is that the end of the world to help that person who is working, but they're just having a rough time? But that could be the end all for that person. That could be something that really pushes them along. But getting something like that is not likely if you're that person, unless you make below a very low amount of money, salary-wise. So that's how I answered that question for her. But she asked me a few questions about government assistance and things like that. And it's always very interesting when people ask you questions, especially repeatedly, because often they're talking about themselves. But I'm just guessing when it comes to that. Another kid asked me, what would I say to a child who was like myself, who was abandoned? And I told him that it's important that you don't take on the responsibility of the adults who are around you, and that their failures are not an indication of your value as a child. Often kids will take ownership of adult problems and they'll think that something is wrong with them. That's what I did when I was a kid. I thought the reason my father wasn't around was because something was wrong with me. Um, as I became an adult, and it took me many decades to come to the realization that no, my father just didn't love me. But that's not my fault. That's his crap that he has to deal with. But that's not an indication of my value as a child. So, once again, I don't know. Maybe he's asking that question for him. So, those were like two big questions that stood out that were asked. I asked them a question. Did any of my books impact them? And one girl had answered that for one of the chapters, she got really upset when they were going over it in the class, and she left the room, um, and eventually came back. But she did admit that later that night she thought about it, and the following day she thought about it. And she concluded that ultimately she took something from it. The book did impact her positively. So, it's really important for these kids to be confronted with different perspectives, different ideas, um, because they have no life experience. And I guess that's where it brings me to the politics side. Because when I thought it was sort of wrapping up, um, the conversation shifted to George Floyd. And then one kid asked me about this administration and illegal immigration. And I kind of paused and I asked, like, hey, is it all right if I answer these questions? Because these are very political answers that I'm going to have to give because these are very political questions. And they said, it's fine that you answer. So I went on and I gave my answer about illegal immigration, all this other stuff. But the thing that just stuck out to me was, why do you care? You're 13. Like, why are kids so enamored when it comes to politics? Why do we even care what's going on?
I can't breathe! 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 They go low. I can't breathe!
No, if they go low, you can come back up from behind and get them in the back.
We're going to get our freedom regardless.
Because I know when I was 13, I didn't give a damn about politics or anything. The most political that I sort of understood stemmed around certain things that happened because of 9/11, because I was in high school when the 9/11 attacks happened. And I remember that day vividly. And our country was mourning. And it became sort of a political thing because how are we going to respond? One, who did it? Who's responsible? All these different things. But that was relatively short-lived because I was a teenager. I was worrying about, trying to pass class and if a girl likes me and all this other nonsense that every other teenager worries about. And I actually feel bad for these kids who are being treated like miniature adults, who are being told to care about quote unquote injustices that are happening around the world. And why? There's nothing you can do about it. Why are these kids so enamored when it comes to politics? And the only answer I can come up with is because the adults have failed the kids.
Nolan Davis says he wants to make a difference.
Kids can make a change.
When Ryan and Kristen Davis adopted Nolan and his sister Caroline, they made it their mission to get educated.
Being now an interracial family, we had to learn a lot about what it meant to be white parents with black children.
But sometimes kids ask questions that are difficult to answer, which is what happened after Nolan learned about George Floyd.
Why did they do that to him? And I don't have a good answer.
So the Davis family decided to attend a Black Lives Matter march, like this one. And then Nolan asked if he could have a march of his own. It was supposed to be just friends and family, but that changed when this poster was put on Facebook.
Before you know it, we had over 200 chairs.
Nolan plans to not only lead the march, which starts at Kirkwood Park, but to make a speech. We got a sneak peek.
I'm worried about black people like me getting hurt. Some skin is like chocolate, some is like vanilla, Some of us mixed together like mine, but we're all people.
With the pandemic, no one knows what school will look like this fall. But some kids are getting an education right now.
I think by bringing kids into it, we're raising the next generation to, I say, stand up and speak out.
Kids can make a change.
The adults are forcing these kids to care about politics. The adults are forcing these kids to care about things they have no control over. Whether this kid knows about illegal immigration or George Floyd or Palestine or any of these other causes, whether they know about it, they have zero control over it, zero say. These are kids who are 5 years away from voting. And that 5 years is not like going from 40 to 45. Going from 13 to 18 is a drastic change in their mental development, their life development, all these different things that are happening to them. They have no world experience. And so, for the most part, what they know is what they're being told. Some of these kids grow up a little bit fast, unfortunately, because, they're being placed in adult situations too early because of failed home lifestyle situations. But other than that, they're not supposed to care about this stuff. Why does that affect you? Why are you worried about adult concerns? And that's why I keep coming back. Because the adults have forced them to. Whether it's corporations have forced them to because they're cramming this stuff into social media and telling them you're a bad person if you support this person, or you're a good person if you support this person. Well, I want to be a good person, and that person's bad. Okay, fine. Why is that person bad? Oh, we have all the reasons why they're bad. And you know what? You should use these buzzwords. Fascist, misogynist, racist, xenophobe. Oh, yes. I'm enlightened now. That's what these kids are being fed. They're being fed through social media, that they're supposed to care about things they have no control over. It's even down to elementary. I have a friend of mine who's pulling her kid out of class, pulling her kid out of this particular school, and it's one of the top-ranked schools where she lives, in the state that she lives in, and putting him into like a regular traditional school that just teaches you math, reading, and it's just all the basics that you would think that you would get at a school. And these are very young kids. And it's because they're being told to care about their emotions. How are your emotions today? How are you feeling? How does this math equation make you feel? It's all this nonsense that they're cramming into these kids' heads. You're supposed to care about your feelings. Oh, how do you feel? You feel this way? Oh, it's an emergency. Let's look and see what kind of pills we can give you. That's what's happening to these kids. They're being adultified. Let's have a therapy session. Let's have a group therapy session by a non-mental health professional, like your teacher, who's going to go over your emotions. Or worse, let's have our teachers teach our kids ethics. Because that's not their job. Your job is to teach them how to read. Why are you teaching them who's a good person, who's a bad person, all this other nonsense? Why are you teaching that? Why are you going over political things? Why are you talking about sexuality with our kids? Once again, this is not the kids' fault. These kids asking me these questions, it's not their fault. They didn't ask for this. The adults created this environment for them. No one's protecting these kids. That line between being a child and an adult, gone. Or in some situations, very blurry. They know a little bit too much about stuff that's going on. And we haven't even dove into sexuality and all the perverts who want their kids to be exposed to other perverts. But we're just talking about politics. Like, why do these kids care so much about political causes? Why do they? One kid asked me, so are you saying like I'm not supposed to care about injustices that are happening? I'm like, you can care and you can be emotive, But I guess my follow-up would be to him is like, why do you care? Like, you know how many bad things happen around the world that I've never heard of? Or maybe I've heard of and nobody else has heard of. A lot of bad things happen around the world that nobody ever finds out about. Or let's say you find out about this thing and it's happening in some remote part of the world. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? There is only so much empathy that an individual can have about everything that is happening. And there are always bad things happening because there's evil all around us. Just as well, there's a lot of great things that are happening because there are a lot of wonderful, blessed people that are in our lives. But that's not what they're focused on. They're focused on the negative. They're focused on the car crash of life. They're focused on, well, what do I do? How do I support the poor children in in a given country that I'll never go to, that has nothing to do with my life? Like, I have so much empathy for them. I want to hold a sign. I want to do something for them. Way to make these kids emotionally involved about things they have no control over. That's what the adults have done to these kids. Why do kids care about politics? Because the adults have failed them.
Let's take a look now at this moment of brightness as we see this young little baby out part of these protests holding that Black Lives Matter sign. It was a moment that a lot of folks enjoyed to see out there. That baby standing, though, with some rain boots on and also standing.
Whether it's their teachers, the parents, whether it's companies have failed these kids, that line between what a kid should know and what they shouldn't know, gone. Now we put overt sexual things on Disney. We want to have deep conversations and expose them to all different types of sexuality, right? That's what we've done to the kids. And then we wonder, how come that Gen Z is so messed up? What's going on with them? It's like this is what's going on with them. The adults have failed them. The adults ran around acting like whimsical kids, and then we tell the kids to respond to the world like adults. Think about adult issues, think about adult politics. They don't know what to do with that. The kid doesn't have experience with that. They've never even had a job. And we want them to worry about the economy or social issues, relationship dynamics. They have no experience. So I feel sad for many of these kids because it's not their choice. It's not their choice. Just as children are not responsible for everything that they do, it's because the adults are the guardians of the kids. The adults are responsible for the children. That's how it's actually supposed to be. But now we say the children are responsible for themselves and they can think these things through just like an adult. And we forget that they're kids. That's our society today. So I feel bad for some of these kids who have to think about these things, but they shouldn't have to.